have we done? We had notice to proceed in October 2021 from the city. After that, we collected a bunch of traffic and collision data in November, and that is not correct. That's a year off, so that should have been November 2021 where the environmental letters went out. Apologize for that. The survey was completed in December of 2021, and then we held our local concerns meeting where we first met a lot of you folks back in December of 2021. We have been pretty busy since then, collecting and analyzing data and speaking to folks in the field. As you can see, from January through April and into March, we met with some city folks to talk about drainage and requirements for drainage. We met with utility companies a couple of months ago in March out in the field, and we've had a number of butter meetings where we've taken plans and we've gone and met with folks just to talk about their concerns, circulation on their sites, and how we might be able to improve the overall intersection operations. And we developed the purpose and needs statement last month, and tonight obviously we're here for the second public meeting. So here's where we are in the project development process. We started out collecting traffic data and survey data. We solicited input in the local concerns meeting. We've crafted the purpose and needs statement. We've already developed a range of alternatives that we're going to share with you tonight. We've begun our evaluation of environmental impacts. That's going to continue in earnest after tonight's meeting, when we have a pretty good idea of what direction we're heading. And tonight we're going to receive public input on those alternatives. And after this, we'll be finalizing the recommended alternative to move forward into design. And we'll be looking for approval from the city and the state to move forward with that pending tonight's meeting. This is the typical workflow. I think I shared this with you last time we met here. So this is as dictated by New Hampshire DOT and Federal Highway through their process. We're over here at the engineering study phase. These are all the different steps that we need to get through before we can actually build the project. So right now we're down at the bottom of the engineering study where we've done all of the studies, we've run through the analysis, we're developing a final report that's going to be submitted following this meeting tonight. And then we will be looking for approval of that engineering study before we move to preliminary design, which would be the next step where we really start putting pen to paper and finalizing the details of the project.
What's the tentative schedule?
We'll get to that. Okay. Thank you. So we're here right now. So the purpose and needs statement that's been developed, this was developed in concert with the project team and the state regulators. You kind of get blacked out up at the top, but this is what requirements, why a purpose and needs statement is required. It's required for NEPA clearance, that's the National Environmental Policy Act. So this is all dictated by some steps that we have to go through to get permits for the project. Defines transportation issues and needs that you all experience out there. And the purpose and needs statement states the reason for the project and what the intended outcomes are supposed to be. It also establishes the basis for alternatives. We just can't define what we want to build out there based on what we want. We have to, the alternatives that we select are really based on, how it serves the public, how it serves the need, based on, on input from you all folks in the analysis that we're doing. Purpose and needs statement is also used to compare the effectiveness of the build alternatives against the no build. We could do nothing, and that wouldn't change anything out here. The intersection would still operate like crap, and you wouldn't see any benefit to that. An alternative that does not achieve the primary purpose would ultimately be eliminated, and there is at least one of these in the set that we're going to show you tonight. The goals and objectives aim at the development of context-sensitive solutions. What does that mean? It helps us to find something that fits within the context of the community that we're serving, you all folks. If you remember, this is a slide that we pulled out of the original presentation. The goals of this project were driven by the need to reduce air emission. If you remember, the funding for this project is coming through a CMAQ grant, Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Grant. The city was successful in securing from DOT and Federal Highway. And so the money is coming from them. That comes with certain requirements. The requirement of the project is that we improve operations of the intersection to a point where we're actually reducing emissions by reducing delays at the intersection. In short, the shorter time that people sit in their cars at stoplights and generate emissions, the better the air quality gets. That's the short story. So the other goal is to decrease delay and congestion. And at the time of this intersection, when we did the study, represented 22% of the overall delay in the corridor for the entire South Willow Street corridor. That's pretty significant, which is why this intersection was targeted along the entire corridor. That said, the city is also working on moving forward with another project that you may have heard about, and that's the Adaptive Signals Project, where they're making timing and signal changes all the way down South Willow Street to improve operations and traffic flow past the interstate and all the way up to Queen City Ave. Separate project, but we did have to consider it with this one. And the outcome of that is improve intersection safety. As we improve congestion, we improve traffic flow, the improvements to safety are there. We had to look at traffic analysis, crash analysis. You might remember last time we met, we went over the results of that and where a lot of the collisions occurred and reasons why. And so what goes into our design analysis is trying to find solutions to some of that stuff. Largely, we answered a lot of those things with geometric changes. So you might remember some of this. If you remember, we took notes on a flip chart last time we met. We recorded that information, wanted to make sure that we brought it back here, to identify what we're actually doing with that. So these are actually the comments that were made in the last public information meeting, if you remember. One of the problems that was identified was the eastbound left queue on Weston Road at Dunkin' Donuts driveway is problematic. Not enough green time to clear the intersection. The westbound left turn from Weston Road is not clear. So westbound, yeah, that's this one. And the second left on Weston Road is needed, so recommending a second left turn out of Weston Road here to help clear the traffic. That was one of the recommendations.
Sorry, can you point to that, where you put that in?
Right here?
Yeah, so so you're talking about, this is the first meeting I've been to, and for whatever reason, even though we're butters, we never got any notice. But anyway, so got the right turn lane going through by the Dunkin', and then coming off of Weston, you're gonna have a right turn lane, a straight lane, and then a left turn lane on the South Willow, and then a left turn lane into the Dunkin's. Is that what you're talking about?
We'll go over some of that stuff. We have some detailed plans that you can take a look at, and that information will also be made available on the city's website after this meeting, so you can look at it then too. But I got some detailed plans that will probably answer your questions.
So, but that comment right there was that in the meetings in the fall, people kept saying that we needed a second left off Weston Road to South Willow towards the highway ramp. So we were asked to look at how can we make that possible to get a second turn lane onto South Willow Street.
So there would be two left turn lanes side by side?
Yes.
That was something that we were tasked with looking at from the public comments.
Again, these are...
What are you looking at, 6 foot wide lanes?
These are comments that came from the public from the last
We'll
meeting.
get to the alternatives that we looked at and how to.
Okay, yeah, I mean, as obviously there's not, okay, go ahead.
Thank you. The no stop area on Weston is problematic. This one right here, we have the paint on the ground in front of the Dunkin' Donuts.
Yes.
Nobody really pays attention. Cut through mobile or right turn is problematic, so it's these people that do this and go through the mobile station. One suggestion was to move the Dunkin' Donuts driveway to Andrea Drive, putting it somewhere over here on Andrea Drive. This is a cut through that goes from Weston over to South Willow Street northbound. Another suggestion was to make a left turn out of the mobile drive on Weston. No, it said that that's an issue, so this movement, just left turn out of the mobile station is an issue. Provide a bike path connection. Probably not something that we can address as part of this project because there really aren't any bicycle facilities on South Willow Street at all. And so to build something isolated at this location, it doesn't really serve a whole lot of function.
And if I can add a little additional context about the local station with the left turn coming out of it. So we're in Brook Hollow.
Okay.
And I spoke to Roach.
Did we speak earlier? Yeah.
Roach?
Yeah,
Okay.
Rock.
If I'm pronouncing your name right. Right, so people are making a right out of the mobile and making a U-turn at our property. And it's quite a safety hazard. We got kids, they're coming in, they're whipping around in there because they wanted to make the left, but it's backed up. We've had one car damaged, one of our residents' cars damaged because we backed into it, trying to make the U-turn. And again, so we're taking steps to mitigate it ourselves with speed bumps and cleaning private no turnaround at the apron of our driveway. But anything that can be done to mitigate that would be greatly appreciated.
No, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the conversation we had the other day, about that. And consider a roundabout was one of the things that was suggested we look at for the intersection as well. So those are the comments that were received back in December. So those were all put in the queue, and we took a look at those as we went through our steps. So here's the purpose and needs statement that was developed for the project. This will help guide us in our process along the way, and it's part of the requirements of the plan development process that we go through. The purpose of this project is to reduce traffic congestion, reduce vehicle delays, and lower vehicular emissions attributable to delays at Weston Road and South Willow Street intersection. Very basic purpose that gives us our guiding principles, stemming from the funding that we have as well. The overall purpose of the project is to reduce emissions at the intersection. We do that by improving traffic circulation at the intersection so that people aren't sitting there that long or as long. The need is driven by some modifications to the South Willow Street Weston Road intersection are needed to improve the following: the existing vehicular operational deficiencies at the intersection that lead to long delays, queuing, and safety issues. So all of this, the need stems from the purpose. Operational deficiencies, which include consistent congestion during AM, PM, and Saturday peak hours, as well as drop-offs, school drop-offs and pickup periods entering and exiting Weston Road. Lastly, congestion and delays attributable to increased vehicular emissions from idling vehicles. So that defines the purpose and need statement for the project. Kind of what we already talked about, what we laid out. What you can't read up here, it's blocked out, is that these are some additional goals and objectives that were identified that aren't necessarily part of the purpose and need statement, but are obvious things that should be considered as we move through the project. So obviously, we want to improve the operational flow and decrease vehicular delay within the intersection. That leads to what we already talked about. We want to minimize project impacts on local business operations, natural and cultural environmental resources. It's a very tight area. There's a lot of businesses, as you know, from the Dunkin' Donuts to the mobile station, the mall across the way, and Corcado. So our job is to try to do as much as we can within the right-of-way that we have, within what is owned by the city, work within those limits to the extent that we can, and make as many improvements as we can to the intersection while maximizing that space that we have and minimizing costs. Improve corridor accessibility for pedestrians, including sidewalks and ADA compliant crossings. So part of what we're doing is part of the design. We're making some improvements to some of the pedestrian ramps, looking at the crosswalks. The signals that are going to be included, you'll see later, are going to provide some improved pedestrian crossings there as well. Improve operational safety of intersection while reducing traffic conflict points. You'll see through the geometry that has been laid out, what we're trying to do is consolidate points of conflict, where right now you have the Dunkin' Donuts driveway, you have the mobile station, you have Andrea Drive. All of these are points of conflict with multiple lanes that people have to cross over that result in a lot of the collisions that you see out there today at various severities. So, to your point, your question, here's the alternatives that we're evaluating. So I'm going to show you a range of alternatives that we walked through. And on those alternatives will be a list of advantages and disadvantages as well that we use to evaluate them for viability as we walk through. So what do we use to evaluate the intersection the alternatives? We're looking for local input and feedback. We considered the past studies. We walked through some of this last time we met. Reduce delay and congestion. We're looking for something that improves safety. Access management, what does that mean? How people come and go out of driveways, how they access the public road. That's access management. Utility relocations, we're trying to minimize what we're doing out there, albeit we are going to have some utilities to relocate. There's some poles that have to move. Minimize right-of-way impacts. Obviously, we want to minimize any issues with the abutters out there and minimize what we're doing to impact operations of those businesses. And minimize environmental impacts. So those are the overall drivers of the alternatives that we put together and the things that we look at with each of those alternatives. So you can see up here, this is the no-build alternative. So what does the no-build alternative do? It does nothing. You would walk away, you'd have the same condition out there, but this is something that we have to look at. And we compare the alternatives that we're developing against the no-build alternative. So what you'll see later on in the presentation is we have metrics to define that. Traffic data, delay, queuing lengths, and we measure the no-build versus the alternatives and see how things perform. And that's part of what goes into selecting the preferred alternative. So what are the advantages? No changes or property impacts. Yay, right? No construction impacts. Yay. No capital costs. Those are the advantages. What are the disadvantages? Maintains the existing Dunkin's access on Weston Road. Does not reduce emissions. Doesn't satisfy the overall goal of the project out of the purpose and need. Does not improve operations at the intersection at all. It would just continue to get worse as we go from 2023 to 2033 and beyond. And traffic continues to grow. Does not improve safety at the intersection. So the geometry remains the same, conflict points remain the same, just maintain what you have. It does not address operations on South Willow Street at all. So again, that 22% contributing to the overall congestion and delay on South Willow Street, nothing would be done about that. So this is alternative number one that we looked at. I'm trying to figure out what the first one is.
Excuse the right turn from South Willow Street to Weston.
Thanks, Steve. That's why we print. Okay. So I'll explain a little bit about the graphics, and then this will apply to all of the alternatives. So you'll get an understanding of the color scheme that we have up here. Not always easy to look at, totally understand. Start with the red. So red lines, that reflects the public right-of-way. So that's the limit of what the city owns and what we define the parcels around Dunkin' Donuts. So you see Dunkin's here, that's the map and lot number. So that's the Dunkin' site. Blue is going to be the property line that separates the condominium property over here, Hollow Brook, from this parcel over here. That's the blue line, which is the property line. Over here you have global companies and mobile. I believe these are two in the same ownership. That's a property line that goes between these two parcels. Here you have this property line here, which is the split between Quirk Automotive and the mobile station here. And then down below you have Centrico Manchester. This is the mall area. These two parcels are owned by the same company, and that's the entrance to the mall across the street, and the Taco Bell. And again, you have right-of-way in red here, and what might be difficult to see is there's also an orange line here that sits behind that, 10 feet behind the red line here, 5 feet behind the red line here. What that does is it defines an easement that has already been secured by the city from the mobile corporation when they redevelop this site. What does that mean? It's an area that is encumbered by the city for future widening of South Willow Street and Weston Road in this area. So that to us becomes something that we strive to work within. So that land has already been dedicated for this future widening, so we're trying to work within those limits. Green would be a raised island or an island. It could be like a concrete island, possibly flush, possibly raised. Haven't really gotten into that yet. Yellow is kind of a faint yellow coloring here. That would be new pavement, new asphalt, blacktop. So that really defines the limits of the project and what we would be resurfacing for the roadway. Then you see pavement markings here, arrows and omnis. So you see lane use here that would define where cars go. I'll get into a little bit more on that. Purple along this side would be a reconstructed sidewalk all through here. So you can see it flanks would be on the other side of the new curb line for the roadway. And you can see that you also see purple over here on this corner. So we'd be looking to reconstruct that corner ramp system and actually separate that crosswalk from this crosswalk to make it a little bit safer. We really like to stay away from putting them on the corners like this, because as vehicles go around the corner, it's not very preferable from an ADA perspective. So we'd be improving that ramp there, that ramp there, that ramp there. And then obviously you have the right-of-way, the public right-of-way on this side of South Willow Street, and we're not really doing anything at all over here on this side. So this would be all new pavement here and here. Questions on that before we go any further? This is really going to apply to all the alternatives, so I'm not going to spend much more time talking about color.
So, it's hard to see it in the plan. It's the only egress to Dunkin' Donuts now over west.
It's also South Willow, you can go in.
The Dunkin' Donuts wouldn't change in this alternative. alternatives. Yeah,
Yeah.
both of their driveways are still there.
We'll get into what the improvements are associated with this. That was really an overview. The red here are the buildings and the canopy for the site. So this is Dunkin' Donuts building, and this is the canopy for the mobile site, just to orientate you a little bit more. Under this alternative, I already forgot. What's that first bullet?
Exclusive northbound right turn to South Road.
Am I crowding? So all of these alternatives have some things that are common to all of them. So in all of the alternatives, there is an exclusive westbound right turn lane from Weston to Andrea Drive. I take that back, not exclusive. In this alternative, there's this exclusive right turn lane from Weston Road to Andrea Drive. The purpose of that is to pull right turning traffic out of this intersection here and to push it to this intersection here. Why would you do that? It pulls vehicles out of the intersection, improves delay, improves operations of the signalized intersection here, pulls a lot of that right turning traffic out, forces them onto a road that is highly underutilized at this point. It's really just a U-turn cut through for local traffic. So that's one of the things that we did. We can do this because we have 2 lanes approaching on Weston Road this way. So it would actually be signed up above towards the condominiums for people to take that right turn, split the traffic, and then you have a single lane coming through here that would then open up to 2 lanes here that would ultimately make 2 left turn lanes onto South Willow Street here. So that's how we get the 2 lanes to work. We do that without impacting the sidewalk on the Dunkin' Donuts side.
On the, where the Brook Hollow condos are, how far back would you have to take the land to create the exclusive right turn lane?
We're not taking any land.
So you're just that corner in front of the.
We're working within the existing roadway in that area. We basically be restriping what's there, not touching the curb line at all.
And then what about the opposite side? It looks like you'll be taking a little bit on the opposite side?
Yeah, you're way ahead of me.
Okay, so. Just trying to understand, because people already do make 2 lanes out of that as is. So this would be formalizing an action anyway, so.
Yep.
It's a good idea.
All right, so 2 left turn lanes. This alternative has it has this formal right turn lane here. So we carve out, right now you don't have a right turn lane making that right from South Willow onto Weston Road. All the alternatives that we're going to show you have this same option here, or not an option, but we'd actually be widening the road along the mobile station property here to add a lane, an 11-foot right turn lane, so that you could unimpeded make that right-hand turn. And that pulls that traffic out of the 2 through lanes here on South Willow Street as well, and helps move traffic through the intersection, further reducing delay. So in that case, there is widening along this side of South Willow Street. We would build a sidewalk behind that new curb line as well. And there would be the need to move utility poles on that side as well. So there's a couple of good-sized utility poles up there. We're looking to move those back. And that work would be, the permanent work would be done within the easement that I talked about earlier that is already secured by the city of Manchester. Back to the property line here. This alternative and all the others also carry that right turn lane back onto the court property. And you can see in this area here, we would actually be working beyond the right-of-way, that red line, and that would require an action with the court, for the court property to actually secure some property rights in this area here to make that happen. So be a minor adjustment to the curb line into this this driveway access here that's, I think, is largely an egress and exit from the court bottom. Let's see. On this side of Weston Road, this proposal keeps the Dunkin' Donuts driveway where it is, so it wouldn't change the Dunkin' Donuts driveway at all. But what this alternative does is it provides a left turn lane into the Dunkin' Donuts here and a bypass lane from that. So if somebody's waiting to take that left turn into the Dunkin' Donuts, it'd be another lane where people could drive right by them and keep going. So that's the intent. And beyond that would be the purple sidewalk over here. The distinction of this one is that with the additional lane here, your instincts were correct, is that you need to look at purchasing additional property here beyond the easement that's already been established on the mobile property. So it'd be more widening that would exceed the available right-of-way. Okay. So that, again, maintains the existing Dunkin' Donuts driveway where it is. One thing I'm also going to state that is true for all alternatives is this corner here. Because all alternatives have the right turn lane going in, and there'll be new signal equipment here, we have to push the signal equipment back, make that right turn lane. There's the need for additional property impacts on this corner here. You can see, hopefully you can see this orange line here. And the work extends beyond that, so we can actually make the turn, build the sidewalk beyond it. And so there'll be some additional impacts on the mobile property site as well that we would need access rights for. All right, so let's go through the list. Exclusive westbound right turn from Weston to Andrea Drive here. Adds the second westbound left turn from Weston to South Willow. That's this one here, so the two lefts. Improves pedestrian access on all legs. That's because we're improving all of these ramps here. Adds eastbound left turn lane to Dunkin' Donuts Drive and a full bypass. That's this left turn lane and that bypass here. Minimal construction impacts to the Dunkin' site, so we're really not doing anything at all on the Dunkin' site. Reduces queues on Weston Road and South Willow approaches. So we'll show you the traffic data results of that after, what that means, and how that performed. The disadvantages is it maintains the existing Dunkin's driveway on Weston Road. Requires added property and site modifications on mobile here along this stretch on Weston Road. Discourages westbound right turns from Weston to South Willow. That's this movement here. So if people get trapped here, they will still be able to make that right turn, but we're discouraging it and trying to encourage people to make this right turn to head points north on South Willow Street. Okay.
So would you put another traffic light at Andrea then? And so to make it easy for people to do that?
You honored your question. The answer is no. Yeah, we talked about that the
Oh,
other
I was
day.
talking about a traffic light actually on Weston, not the Andrea.
Oh,
So
here?
that's a different issue.
Yeah.
Because people end up waiting. So I guess the timing of the traffic lights themselves would need to be adjusted to make it easy for people to be able to make the right coming out of there.
You're very wise to ask the question. This would remain an unsignalized intersection here. There would be an impact on folks who come here to make that right turn to get onto South Willow Street. Operations of those folks, they'd still be able to get out. There would be appropriate gaps for them to be able to get out based on the signal timing and operations, so that as these folks are making this left here, that clears this area for them to actually make that right. So
You'll see that in the traffic.
as the two lefts are coming out here, there's nobody moving this way on South Willow Street.
Right.
And similarly, as these folks making this left turn here from South Willow on the Weston, there's nobody on this part of South Willow Street. So that provides reasonable gaps for people to get out. There is no signal proposed in this intersection here.
Yes. All right, that makes sense, because as that flows better, it's going to create easier egress over there.
And as discussed earlier, the other part that the city is doing is making modifications to the signal systems all along South Willow Street. We've considered that in the analysis as well. And so the results that we have consider those operational improvements. So hopefully when all of this is done and said, you'll see nice progression through South Willow Street. All right, that's alternative one.
Just a quick
Sure.
one. The exit coming out of Mobile onto Weston, would you still be able to cross over straight, or would that raised area?
That's a great question. This is something in final design, we would have to work through this, and it's most likely this island here would have to be pared down to allow that movement to take place. All right, alternative two. Bullets that you can't see up here are the same as the previous alternative number one. All this italicized stuff up here are the ones that carry over. Remember I said each alternative they have very similar characteristics, including this right turn lane here. That remains the same. We still have two lefts coming out of Weston onto South Willow Street. And the difference here, and this is a big one, is that this alternative would propose an island here, a raised median island. What would that do effectively? Well, it keeps people from turning into the Dunkin' Donuts here. It eliminates that conflict point and helps to deal with the operational issues of the intersection and also the safety issues with the collisions. We'll get into the disadvantages in a minute. What that also does is we would only need a single lane coming up through here. You would still have folks who would be turning onto Andrea Drive if they wanted to circle around. But primarily, you just need a single lane approach to come up here. And that results in no impacts, no significant impacts on the mobile property over here. We're still not doing any work on the Dunkin' Donuts site with this one. What are we still doing? We're still improving pedestrian access on each leg. We're still improving the signals. We'd still be building this sidewalk over here, resulting in some impacts on the Quirk property as well as the mobile property to move the poles back, move the sidewalk back, put in the right turn lane, and we would still be impacting this corner here, requiring some property rights to make the right turn lane work. Disadvantages, the proposed island on Weston cuts off eastbound left turns into the Dunkin' site. You can't do this anymore. So think about that from a business and an impact perspective. They don't like that.
It's going to create a new kind of accident anyway. People are going to buy a sidewalk.
So this is one of those things from an operational perspective, when you're considering just traffic and operations, it makes perfect sense to restrict access. From a contextual point of view and how it works with the local community, it doesn't work very well. Because you can't get into the site, and you also can't make this left turn out of the site. So how do you get in? You're relegated to this driveway over here, and this driveway would only be right in and right out only. That's alternative 2.
Do all the options on that right turn lane, the WB50 make that turn?
Great question. We did look at that. The answer is yes.
Yeah, it improves the radius, so it's substantially better for the buses too.
Yeah, so that's one of those design things that, we looked at. Something not working very well. Sorry. That's why this corner has to widen out, because we look at that truck turning, making that right. And from a design perspective, we like to have that maneuver made without encroaching into these lanes over here. We don't want to put the front end of a truck into the front end of a Camry, waiting to go the other way. That's why this gets widened out. So we looked at all the alternatives relative to that. It works well. We looked at buses. We looked at large vehicles, large trucks. Great question. Alternative 3. So this one looks a bit different. So what this one does, the right turn lane is the same. That doesn't change. We still end up with the same level of impacts here on the Quirk and the mobile site. It still provides that right turn, provides the wider throat here to be able to facilitate trucks making that corner without encroaching into opposing lanes here. Still makes these sidewalk improvements here, the ramp improvements, new signals at the corner. So what's different? What's different is we are not forcing people to take this right, but similar to the first alternative, we're going to strongly recommend that they take that right for people who are northbound on South Willow Street if they want to continue to points north and bypass this intersection here. So that we would sign it and stripe it that way, and that pushes these folks this way, same as the other alternatives. You end up with a single lane approach coming through here, opening up into 2 lanes, and again, you get the 2 lefts. It would still come off of Weston Road onto South Willow. So that doesn't change. What does change is we have an 11-foot through lane coming through here, and it's flanked by a 7-foot bypass lane. Let me rephrase that. It's flanked by a 7-foot shoulder that can be used as an informal bypass lane. Why is that important? What we're going to do also under this alternative is close down this driveway access on Dunkin' Donuts and put it over here on Andrea Drive. So you see in orange over here, there's certain modifications that would be made to the Dunkin' Donuts site that would reconfigure some of their internal operations. We'd give them a couple more parking spaces here, but would close this driveway down, so that no longer becomes a conflict point for people on Weston trying to make that left. what we would do instead is we would push those folks to this intersection here, which is 150 feet away from here, eliminating that conflict point, putting them into a more formal intersection, so it's more recognizable as an intersection. People would recognize it more of an intersection. And so folks sitting here, waiting to take that left to get into Andrea Drive and into the Duncan site, that 7-foot shoulder that I talked about here would be there so that people could get around them. It's not formalized, it's an informal shoulder that allows enough width for people to get by. And the reason we looked at this was to minimize property impacts on the mobile property. What this allows us to do is do all of the permanent work on this leg of Weston Road within the easement that was required, or that was acquired. It's right basically at the line. So we'd still have to look at grading impacts on that property and still secure temporary rights to get on and do the work. But permanent work on this leg would be within that easement limits. We still need to look at property rights here and here for this alternative. So the big change with this one is putting the driveway on Andrea Drive. We have met with the folks over at Dunkin' Donuts. They're amenable to this. They understand that it serves a lot of purposes by helping people to actually get into their site more safely, and ultimately will help. This allows for full, it also lines up the mobile station driveway up here. One of the things that we like about this alternative is it creates a more formalized intersection here with the fourth leg being the mobile station driveway. More recognizable as an intersection, allows folks to still do this while only really crossing a single lane here as people are approaching this intersection instead of the 2 lanes that approach it today. It also makes it more recognizable from a driver perspective. We like driver recognition. That's one of those things that we like to see, like to know. Are people recognizing it as an intersection? And doing away with this conflict point here is a major safety improvement, just eliminating that one conflict. How do you get into Dunkin' Donuts? You would come this way here, circulate around to the drive-through, and then circulate back out here, or circle around the building and come back out this way. You can either make a right-hand turn here or a left-hand turn here. Miss anything? Okay. All right, let's go through the bullets. All of this stuff is the same. You get the right turn onto Weston Road to Andrea Drive. Adds the second left turn lane from Weston to South Willow. Improves pedestrian access, relocates Duncan's driveway to Andrea Drive, provides an informal eastbound bypass here. Eastbound is up. Minimizes property impact on the mobile property, so their sign, their vacuum systems, we'd be looking to minimize impacts of that stuff. Let's see, reduces conflicts at the Duncan's driveway here by closing that driveway. Reduces queues on Weston Road and South Willow. What's the disadvantages? Temporary construction impacts to Duncan and mobile sites. That's really for all of the alternatives that impact those properties. Queues on Weston will extend back beyond Andrea Drive. So what all of these alternatives do or don't do is, when you look at the traffic projections, we are processing a lot more volume out of this by adding the second lefts. You're still going to have traffic backing up to some point in here. It's much better though. When we show you the numbers, you'll see the major reduction in traffic queuing. Queuing is how far those vehicles back up the road.
Yeah, looking at that, I'm sitting here thinking with the issues that we have at our place, is that my preference might be to actually take that right turn lane all the way back to our driveway entrance to try to clear the back up there and put it to not block the driveway or to the box in front of our entryway so that our residents can get in and out. At peak times, that right lane, even if people are already queuing up to make a right, with the 2 lanes, it still blocks off our driveway where people can't get out. Like after school time and stuff like that, when it's pretty heavily doing Saturday mornings.
Understood. Maybe what we can do following this meeting is have a follow-up with the city as well and see, how that would work into this project, what that would mean as far as scope of work and how far it would go outside the project area.
And I've already interrupted you. Has there been conversations with the Duncans and Mobile about taking more of their land to do any of this stuff? Like, was there,
There's been
resistance or-
preliminary discussions, like, we already do have the easement on the mobile, we've had preliminary discussions with all of them. This is a federally funded project, so we're required to follow the Uniform Act, go through, get appraisals and offer appropriate property values for whatever temporary and permanent easements that we need for takings in these areas. So we've had initial conversations, no one is opposed to what we're proposing so far. So as we get into the design, we'd actually get into the details of what it'll take to get to that
and
conclusion.
that includes the additional land that was discussed
Well,
on the mobile, yeah?
yes.
Okay.
I can answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Great. All right, one more. So one of the comments that came out of the last meeting was a roundabout. How would that work? So we looked at it. So all other things equal, we still have the right turn lane here on the mobile station. It extends back to the Quirk property. None of that changes. None of the intersection up here changes. We would still have double lefts coming out of Weston Road onto South Willow Street. None of that changes. We would have a splitter island here, so really similar to alternative 2 that we looked at earlier. The driveway on Dunkin' Donuts would be closed, and that would be relocated back to Andrea Drive. This would be narrowed to a point where property impacts may be limited at this location, but you can see there would be other impacts up here. So where does it vary? The footprint of a roundabout is significantly larger than just an intersection when we looked at it, just to make operations work. So this is, if we were to move forward with this, this is probably what the geometry would need to look like. A couple of things to note here. We talked about the red line being the right-of-way lines, right? So you got here and here. So this boundary here represents the limit of Brook Hollow condominiums. So that's this property over here. So to make this work and to carve out that space for those right turners in this area, we'd be looking at a significant property impact here on Brook Hollow, which we're not seeing on any of the other alternatives that still perform adequately. Same thing on the mobile site, we'd be looking at probably some significant additional impacts here. And this would also impact their internal operations of how they function internal to the site. So there would be additional impacts here. The big thing about this alternative, though, that is problematic is that as we look at the queuing for the vehicles that would continue to stack up through the intersection back to some point back here, although significant improvements over the existing condition and what we're seeing 10 years from now, if you have vehicles that are stacking up through the roundabout and through here, anybody who's coming up here to take a left and to get into Andrea Drive, the Dunkin' Donuts site, would not be able to make that movement. They'd be stuck in that roundabout. And that's problematic because what you would see is those vehicles would end up queuing back here and spilling out onto South Willow Street, and we'd end up with something very similar to what you have today. So we'll run through the bullets. All of this stuff is the same. Relocating the Dunkin' driveway, provide the informal eastbound bypass shoulder at Andrea Drive. That's not right. Reduce conflicts at the Dunkin' driveway here by eliminating the driveway. We reduce queues on Weston. Disadvantages, location of the Dunkin's driveway at Andrea Drive at the roundabout. This also, because we'd have to push it back further to get it away from the primary intersection here, this would cause some associated impacts with how Dunkin' Donuts utilizes their site for deliveries, for trucking deliveries internally. It would make it more difficult for them to function. Right now, their delivery trucks sit here, and if they sit here to get access to their building, vehicles would be plugged up and they couldn't actually access the site. Westbound queues on Weston will extend through the roundabout beyond the driveway. That's up here. The above will not allow eastbound Weston vehicles to turn left at Andrea and will back up to South Willow. That's what I talked about for vehicles wanting to make that movement there. And there would be additional impacts on mobile, Dunkin', and Brook Hollow condo complex. So for those reasons, you're not going to see this one move forward. So this is an alternative performance summary. And I'm going to run through this, and it's a lot of numbers up here, and I don't expect you to read them all, so I'm going to point you to the ones that mean something. So what this does is it summarizes some of the things that we look at as we design something like this, from intersection delay to queuing, stacking of vehicles, And overall level of service. Level of service is how we measure the performance of an intersection from A to D or F. So this summary table, what it does is it puts all that in one place and shows you how each of the alternatives that we've evaluated function, how they respond to the needs out there. The only thing that I'll say is that we did drop alternative 4, the roundabout, because that one didn't really satisfy the purpose and need, really didn't do what we wanted it to do. It doesn't improve any of the conditions out there, while resulting in additional impacts. That one you won't see here. What you will see is the no build, and all of these numbers I'll go over here. Alternative 1, 2, and 3. So alternative 1 had a left turn lane into the current Dunkin' Donuts site and a bypass lane. Didn't do anything to Dunkin' Donuts, left it where it was. Alternative 2 had the median down the middle of Weston Road, which blocked off left turn access into Dunkin' Donuts Drive, but didn't move the driveway. Alternative 3 is the one that moves the driveway to Andrea Drive, provides a small informal bypass shoulder for people to get around sitting in Andrea Drive. What we also did is when we look at how intersections are going to perform, we look at it now for the opening year. When's the project going to be built? And here we assume it's going to open up in 2023. We'll look at the schedule in a little bit. I'll show you what that's going to look like. And what we also, for this type of project, look 10 years out. So we look at traffic projections in the area, how we know land is going to develop, what the growth patterns are going to be in the area. And we make those projections in traffic movements, and that helps us determine how this thing's going to operate 10 years from now.
And that's the no build.
So we have the opening year of 2023, and we have the horizon year, the design year of 2033, 10 years from now. Right? So you're going to see no build here, and it's shaded in with a different color. That becomes our measuring stick. So all the alternatives that we evaluate get measured against how the no build functions. Does it make it better? Does it make it worse? How much does it make it better? That's what we're going to show. So I'm going to focus just for this on alternative 3. Because alternative 3, when you look at these numbers, tends to be the best performing alternative when you look at it with respect to property impacts and what's actually doing for signal and traffic operations out there. So there's a whole bunch of numbers here that I'm going to run through. What we do is we match these in alternative 3. We did them for all of them, but I'm going to focus on alternative 3. We match them against the no build over here to look at what that performance measure is. So let's start with the no build alternative. So the no build in 2033, we're going to look 10 years in the future. That intersection operates at level of service F. It's failing. It's awful. Right? Now, when you come across to alternative 3, you look at the level of service 10 years from now, and you're functioning at a level of service C, D, and E for the AM peak, the PM peak, rush hours, as well as the Saturday peak. And interestingly enough, the Saturday peak was quite high on this project. Shoppers, the mall. So when we look at these performance metrics here and match them against this is where we see great improvements. The next metric is intersection delay. So it's an aggregate measure of how the intersection performs. And in this case, the existing intersection delay, overall intersection delay, not just for one leg, but for the overall intersection. AM peak 152 seconds, PM 171 seconds, and Saturday 213 seconds. That's high. So we come across to alternative 3 for those same metrics, 29 seconds versus 152, 40 versus 171, and 73 versus 213 for the AM, PM, and Saturday. So this is the metric that we use, and you can see the significant improvements in how the intersection functions. Basically, you're going to clear traffic up a lot faster. You know, and that's important for this project, because remember what we're trying to do. We're trying to reduce emissions, reduce congestion, and improve traffic flow. So that's a measure that we look at that proves that. The last one, and probably what's going to be most important to you, is going to be queuing on Weston Road. So now we're just talking about how traffic stacks up on Weston Road. So for the AM, PM, and Saturday peak, that is estimated at 727 feet back from South Willow Street up towards Brook Hall. Okay? Now remember, the intersection with Andrea Drive is 150 feet up from the intersection of South Willow Street. So 727 feet is significantly further back.
Right, so that's past our driveway.
Yes.
Yeah, for reference, your driveway is about 500, so in looking at the conditions, we're looking at under, like, the average queue conditions being.
And we can verify that.
Thank you for
I think
that.
it's part of the selling point of this, if you look at alternative 2033 compared to where we are today with the no bill, even it still remains a huge improvement. So, I mean, that speaks very, well for the whole.
That's a great point. I'll pay you later. All right. So continuing on with queuing. So queuing in the PM peak, again, this is Weston Road, 583 feet, and then in the Saturday, 680. So you can see, the AM and the P and the Saturday peak are really the key performers. So that's the no build, and then we again take it across to alternative 3. You go from 727 feet to 253 feet for the AM. Significant change. Now remember, it's 150 feet from South Willow intersection up to Andrea Drive, so you're still stacking beyond that, but it's not 727 feet. It's a considerable improvement. PM peak goes from 583 to 210, and then the Saturday peak from 680 to 268. And again, this is 10 years from now, 2033. So this is how we measure the performance of these alternatives. Based on this information and looking at alternatives 2 and 1 against the no build, alternative 3 became our preferred alternative. And this is kind of a better blow up of this intersection to show you what it looks like. And I'll go through it again just so that you understand what alternative 3 is. Alternative 3 provides a soft right turn lane here, which would be signed back to above Brook Hollow and coming back here. Having those people taking rights wanted to go northbound on South Willow Street and avoid this intersection, they would take that. It relocates the Dunkin' Donuts driveway from Weston Road to Andrea Drive, reconfigures part of their parking lot. They're good with this. The other thing it does is it provides those double lefts from Weston onto South Willow Street. It also carves in this exclusive right turn lane here to further relieve congestion on South Willow Street. Still improves the pedestrian crossings on all the quadrants. Rebuilds the sidewalk here against the mobile station driveway and provides that lane and a 7-foot informal bypass shoulder. What am I missing? Okay. So that's our proposed action. After all of that and the analysis that we took through, and I really appreciate you sitting through that. That was a lot of information. And again, it'll be on the city's website. You'll be able to look at it in more detail if you want. After all of that, the proposed action that we're recommending is this alternative number 3 here as the alternative that provides the benefits while minimizing cost and impacts. Questions before we move on?
Just have a quick question. On the walkway, how far up is that going to go on Western Road?
This one?
The one, yeah.
This one drops right here. There is no sidewalk that goes further on.
Okay, so it's just up to the mobile station, or
That's
is
it.
it a little past the mobile?
No, it stops at the driveway. It does not go across the driveway. That's what it does today.
Oh, okay, I gotcha. Okay,
Okay.
yeah.
So, with the 2 left turn lanes,
Yep.
which will clear Weston quickly, it's going to dump an increase in frequency of traffic onto South Willow,
Correct.
which already kind of gets backed up as is. So there's going to be traffic light adjustment to try to get
front
it
and back.
back.
There will be, and the city also has what's called signal performance measure project, where we're putting in additional detection and smart technology into these cabinets. It's a separate project that is hopefully going out to bid. It's already designed and it's going out to bid this fall, so that should be in place before any of this goes in. So some of that technology will be able to monitor the existing queue lanes and adjust timings on the spot as well, and change offsets downstream to try and improve the flow on all of South Willow Street. So that's going in first, and this will come after it, and it'll be integrated into the system. So,
Okay, great.
So I'm going to cheat here for a second, and because we have a couple of abutters here, and I'm glad we do, between Duncan's and Quirk. We have a couple of blow-ups that I think you'd be interested in. That we threw into the slide deck. And I'll come back to the rest of the stuff, I promise. So this is a blow-up of the mobile and Dunkin' Donuts parcel here. So you can see in a little bit more detail what we're doing in the corner here. There's some signal equipment that has to go in here for the improvements that are being made. Here you can see a little bit better the existing right-of-way line in red and that easement line here in orange that the city already has. And you can see with the right turn lane where we widened it out for trucking traffic here, we are cutting a corner a little bit wider here, which requires additional property beyond this easement line here. So hopefully that clarifies that a little bit for you. There's also going to be some signal equipment sitting behind the sidewalk over here, so there'll be some modifications to the grass strip out there on the mobile property, as well as the poles that will have to get relocated back here. So we've already been talking to the utility companies about moving those poles, and we'll just continue to speak with them about schedule and what that's going to be for them. You know, I know there's significant poles in front of the Quirk property, and we're talking to them about those as well. All right, so this shows you what's going on up Weston Road as well. So you can see the existing property line here, and then the easement line here in orange. And you can see that the purple sidewalk, which is the proposed walkway, is all within that orange line. So it's within the easement that's been defined already. That was our goal on this alternative. But we still do have to look for property rights in this corner because we're widening that radius so that trucks and buses can make the rounding. This shows, that's one more. So this is the Quirk parcel. So this is the property line between Quirk and Mobile here. This is your northern entrance or your exit. You can only make rights out of this today. And so it's right in and right out only. So what we'd be doing here is carrying the sidewalk across the driveway, pushing that back due to the right turn lane, and then bringing that sidewalk back into the existing one here just beyond the driveway. What that allows us to do is right after your driveway, cut in that right turn lane here and allow people to take that right onto Weston Road. All right. Questions? Okay, now I'm going to go back. All right, so that's the proposed action. What's the next steps in the schedule? I don't know what that says. Next steps. So we have to finalize the engineering study following tonight's meeting. So we've been compiling all this information. It's going to go into a report that Kristen gets to read and mark up and make fun of us for. After that gets accepted by DOT in the city, then we'll be looking for a notice to proceed with preliminary design, meaning that we start looking at the final details of this. And that also allows us to put a finer point on right-of-way needs as well, defining what those right-of-way impacts might be. We'll complete the preliminary design, and then we can go into finalizing the environmental study. The NEPA document is something that's required, National Environmental Policy Act. We're going to have to go through that process before DOT will allow us to move forward with the project. They have to be satisfied that we've met all of the environmental requirements of the project before they'll allow us to move forward. And then we'll have another public meeting if needed, if there's a need for that, unless we can come to an agreement with the abutters on what is being proposed. Once we get through that, we'd be going into final design and right-of-way. So at that point, we'll have right-of-way defined. We'll know what the right-of-way needs are going to be. There would be appraisals done for those impacts, and just compensation would be offered at that point based on the outcome of the appraisals. And there'd be communication all along with the abutters. And we would complete the final design, clear utilities and right-of-way, meaning that we actually have to put a certification out there that says that we're done with utilities. You know, they have an action plan moving forward. We've cleared the right-of-way. We have agreements in place with all of the abutters that we need agreements with. And at that point, we would be authorized to continue moving forward and prepare bidding documents and go out to construction. Our best guess on what that schedule is right now, pending all of that stuff happening, is final design efforts, spring of 2023, bidding and construction, summer of 2023, spring of 2024. So you can see, go back to the chart at the beginning of the presentation where I showed you where we were in the process. We're still at the far left at the very beginning. once we get through tonight, we'll be able to start moving a lot faster, assuming that we're good with moving forward with the preferred alternative. But we still have a lot of detailed design work to do, permits to acquire, and right-of-way to acquire. That's what takes so long between now and then. So, that's all I got. Did I miss anything?
Excuse me, the talks at the first meeting about the air quality was which we're trying to improve this intersection. Is any of the funding tied to that air quality doesn't improve or doesn't meet what they're expecting it to improve, or is that just?
As long as it shows an improvement in delay in air quality, it doesn't, that's all, that's the end goal. As long as there's some improvement, it will still be eligible for the
If you
project.
go back to that chart that showed the differences in delay reduction, that itself basically is a quantitative analysis that air quality will improve.
And the complete funding is federal for this?
It's 80% federal with a 20% city match.
And the city has budget for it?
Yes, we have most of our match so far. There was some fees that some people, as they developed along South Willow Street, that different developers have contributed to the planning board. So over half of the match was provided through the planning board as a fee that they collected along the South Willow border, and the city will fund the remainder when they need it through the CMP program when we get closer to construction. So next fiscal year.
So the slide up in front of you now is the same thing that we presented at the first local concerns meeting, and that shows the funding levels for the project. We're still evaluating the actual estimates, but what we're seeing right now is they're in line with what the funding is. This shows that the total project cost is just over $1 million, and this shows you what the construction and right-of-way costs might be. So this is all publicly available on DOT's website.
And again, that is the full cost, so the city's cost is 20% of that total, so about
Is
$200,000.
that using today's cost or is
That is what we're looking at. Yes.
Yeah, that's a real challenge right now.
Yes, it is.
Bids are all over the place with supply chain issues that are going on. It's,
Like an 8% inflation.
it's a real challenge.
Can it become cost prohibitive if this gets postponed, or is it where it costs what it costs?
Well, the city would have to, we have to figure it out, and there's ways you can, do bid alternates or not repave all of this, can we add a right turn lane without, and patch it, like things we don't want to do, but if we have to, when we get down to it, we don't have the money if it's that crazy. Or, depending on what money the state has, sometimes they'll contribute more with their state match if we contribute more. So when we get there, we would figure out those details.
It's a great question. Our job now is to finalize details on this and put dollars to it. What we're seeing is that we're within range of the estimates that were provided originally, but, a year from now, I'm not sure what the bidding field is going to look like.
Hopefully it
You
comes
folks are
back
seeing
down.
it with what you deal with on a daily basis, and, it affects everybody. More questions? All right. Keith, anything to add?
I guess just from what you heard from the alternatives, as you noted, preferred alternative, we're looking at alternative 3. Do you agree or do you disagree?
I agree.
Yeah, I agree also. I think that of the alternatives, it's also going to have the best positive impact on accident reduction, because I think you described it as an expected intersection kind of thing, so that people will presumably slow down and be more cognizant of there could be cross traffic that they hit, which they don't seem to know now.
Driver recognition, correct. Yeah. Anything else? All right, so,
More information will be posted on the website, the city's website.
Yeah.
yeah,
So this presentation,
give us a little time. It won't be there tonight. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Did everybody sign in?
Yes.
Perfect. Chase you down. Appreciate your time. Thanks for coming out. And I'm sure we'll be talking to some of you folks. Yeah, thank you.